So how long does it take to go from $100,000 to $1 million? Unfortunately, the answer is it's probably going to take longer than what you think, but I want you to know the facts so that you can prepare. And at the end of the video, I'll share with you some advice that I have, some suggestions to make the journey quicker and more enjoyable. Okay, let's jump in. So this table here shows somebody starting with $100,000. They're saving $10,000 a year, and their return is 7% a year. So with that, you can see how many years does it take? It takes right at 23 years, so almost a quarter of a century. I think that's a lot longer than a lot of folks think. There's a famous quote by Charlie Munger that says, do whatever you have to do to save that first $100,000, and then you can ease off of the gas a little bit. And that's true, but I don't want you easing off the gas too much. So let's keep going. We still have a big challenge in front of us. So we saw that saving $10,000 a year, if we're starting with $100,000, we're getting 7% a year. We saw that that's going to take 23 years. What if we save double that amount? Will that go to 12 years or 15 years? Let's see. So in this chart, the only thing we're changing is we're using $20,000 a year. And you can see here, it still takes you 18 years. So not as big of an impact as what people think. Okay, let's say you can save $30,000, which I know is a lot of money. I'm going to address that in a second. But let's first look at what the data shows us. So again, we're starting with $100,000. We're saving $30,000 a year, and we're getting a 7% return on it. How long does that take us? That takes us 15 years, 1-5. Now, what does it take to save $30,000 a year? That's a lot of money, right? I tell people, unfortunately, you know, what we've been told by the previous generation, what I was told by my parents, you know, save 10% and you're going to be fine. Well, unfortunately for many of us, that's simply not true. You know, we no longer have corporate pensions, and when we get Social Security, for many of us, it's going to be taxed. You know, my parents' generation, for most of the lives that they were looking at from their parents, their Social Security wasn't taxed. It wasn't until 1984 that Social Security started being taxed. And back then it was only at 50%, could be 50% of your Social Security could be taxed. And then in the 1990s it got changed where up to 85% of our Social Security can be taxed. So, you know, the world's quite a bit different. So what does it take to save $30,000 a year? Well, I tell people that 10% is not the right number anymore. Unfortunately, I think that number is 20%, which I know is really hard to do. Let's say that this person is able to save 20%. So that would be $150,000 a year of take-home pay after taxes. So $150,000, 20% of that is the $30,000. That person's probably making $200,000 a year. That's a big salary, and not many of us are making that kind of money. So that just shows how hard it is. So let's look at another thing. Let's say if we were starting with $250,000. So if we were starting with $250,000 and we're saving $10,000, how long does that take to get to $1 million? Well, we're kind of starting off where we left the other chart. When we started with $100,000, saving $30,000, remember it took us 15 years. Now that we're at $250,000, we're saving $10,000. You can see that it takes us to 15 years. Now if we save $20,000 a year, you can see it's taking us about 12 or 13 years. And if we increase that to $30,000 with all the caveats that we mentioned earlier, you can see here it still takes us a little over 10 years, right at 11 years until we're at $1 million. So it's hard. And this just shows why, when you look at the average savings for the average American, why it is what it is. This table here shows what the net worth is, the median net worth by household, not by individual. What net worth is the value of everything that you own less the value of everything that you owe, and that's your net worth. So if you own a home, let's say the home's worth $500,000 and you owe a $300,000 mortgage on it, then your net worth would be $200,000 from the house and let's say you had $50,000 in the bank and no other debt, then your net worth would be $250,000. So this chart here shows for people under 35, their median net worth is less than $40,000. That's a problem. See, this is where America gets into trouble, is by the time we're 35, we want to have for sure that first $100,000 under our belt. And so this is the value of everything for this person. This is not the retirement savings account. So 35 to 44, you can see it's $135,000. 45 to 54, it's a little under $250,000. 55 to 64, now these people are getting close to retiring. You can see it's $365,000. 65 to 74, and this is what I see, the net worth actually goes up. Many of these people are retired, but when they first retire, they see their net worth go up, and then you can see 75 plus, net worth starts going down. And it's interesting to note that BlackRock did a study and found that retirees almost 20 years out had a lot more of their savings left than what they thought. That BlackRock study showed that they had almost 80%, almost 20 years into retirement. So that's why you don't see that net worth dropping between 55 and 64 in the 65 to 74 range. Okay, so that's your total net worth. What does the retirement savings look like? This is a chart from the Wall Street Journal, and you can see here that, you know, almost half of all Americans have no money saved. Almost half have no money saved. And then almost 80% have less than $100,000 saved. So it's really a challenge of really epidemic proportions. And you can see, you know, we're starting with $100,000 in this situation. So, you know, for them, it's even harder. So what can we do to improve this? Well, I think Charlie Munger was right. Now, he made that quote 20, 30, might have even been 40 years ago. I need to look up the date of that quote. And I think saving that first $100,000 is probably now saving that first $250,000, saving that $250,000. And Charlie says, you know, do what you can to save that first $100,000 and then ease off of the gas a little bit. I think today it might be, you know, do what you can to save that first $250,000. So if you haven't started saving yet, you know, what does it take to start saving? What does it take to get that first $100,000? So let's go back to these tables, but I'm going to start with $0. How long does it take you to save that first $100,000? Well, if you're saving $10,000 a year at 7%, you can see it takes about 8 years to get there. So it's not insignificant how long it takes to save that first $100,000. But then you can see it gets easier, and that's really what this table talks about, is each incremental $100,000 is easier. We still have a long journey to go. If you add up all of those years after the first $100,000, that's the exercise we just went through. But let's go through it $100,000 increment at a time. So from $100,000 to $200,000, you can see it takes about 5 years. Now, importantly, the person saving their first $100,000, almost 80% of that money comes from the money that they're putting into the account, right, that they're saving. And only 22% comes from the earnings on the money that they save. But look, pretty dramatically when you go from your first $100,000 to $200,000, now half of the money comes from the money you're putting in, but the other half comes from your money working hard for you. So from $200,000 to $300,000, you can see it takes a little under 4 years, so half of the time it took for that first $100,000. And now about 2/3 of the money is coming from your money working hard for you. Let's call it 60-40. 60% comes from your money working hard for you, and the other 40% comes from the money you're putting in. The next 100,000 going from 300,000 to 400,000. You can see you're only putting in 1/3 of the work. It's now 70-30. So 30% comes from your work and 70% comes from your money working hard for you. And that takes just 3 years. So we've very quickly gone from taking 8 years to save an incremental 100,000 to now just taking 3 years. Let's keep going. 400,000 to 500,000. You can see that takes 2.5 years to do it, and now 3/4 of the work is being done for you from the money you're putting in. And then 500,000 to 600,000. See, it takes a little over 2 years. We're getting down almost to 2 years. And now it's the reverse of the first 100,000. Now 80% of your work's being done by your money, and 21% is effort you're putting in, money you're putting in. 600,000 to 700,000. Now it's under 2 years. And under 2 years, you're increasing your net worth by $100,000. And you're just putting in 20%. Now it's the 80-20 rule. So this is the point where things get really simple, is at $500,000. 600,000 to 700,000 takes less than 2 years. And again, 80% of the work's being done. 700,000 to 800,000 takes one year, 1 2/3 years. So 1 year, 8 months, or really only 20 months. And now you can see again, almost 85% of the work is being done by your money. 800 to 900,000 takes 1.5 years, 18 months, and 85% of the work's being done by your existing base. And then 900 to 100,000 gets really simple. That only takes you 15, 16 months, and almost all of that's coming from your existing base. Not quite. 15%, 14% is coming from you. So, what do we do? And I think one of the takeaways for me is, that first 100,000 in today's world, probably closer to $250,000. And the secret is to get to the point where your money's working harder for you than you're working for it. And you can see that happened in year 2, where almost half of the return was your money working hard for you. So that happens not in year 2, but the second 100,000, as you're going from 100,000 to 200,000. What do? You get that first $100,000, and you keep working hard. You save what you can, but it's also important to enjoy the journey. And so, how do you balance that? Enjoying the journey while Azul is still telling you you need to save 20%, unfortunately. And I think we need to kind of re-look at what the standard American idea, the standard American game plan, our SAG, S-A-G, standard American game plan is for enjoying the journey. And it's not stuff. So much of what we consume on social media and on television is telling us to buy, buy, buy. It's more and more and more. It's stuff, stuff, stuff. And most of the viewers of my channel are 40 years and older. By the time you get to our age, I think we've all realized that, the fancy new car is fun for a couple weeks, but then it just becomes a car. I think the house is an exception. Personally, for me, the neighborhood and my neighbors and the schools that my kids get to go to, and the walkability of it is important to me, and the quality of life is much more important than the square footage or the quality of the finish of the house. A house straddles that, right? It's stuff, right? It's a home, it's a possession, but it's also a home. It's not just a house, it's a home. And the home is the experience, and the home is the community, the home is your neighbors. So that's the combination. So how do we get from 100,000 to $1 million and enjoy the journey? I think we refocus. We refocus on what's important in life, which is relationships, it's experiences, it's adventures, which is kind of the main theme of my channel. Is we have to enjoy the journey, including the journey that we get to do in retirement. Unfortunately, that journey is short, and it's one of the last chapters of our lives, is that 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time that we have remaining if we're fortunate once we're 60, we turn 60 years old. So I want you to think about watching this video here, where I talk about 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can and start that journey. Thanks for watching this one.